Okay, good afternoon and welcome again to all and to those who joined in the last few minutes. My name is Kara J. Kelman Thomas, and I will be the moderator for this afternoon's panel discussion. The panelists and the order in which they will be addressing us are Dr. Carmita Dougling, public health specialist presenting on living in a sick world. The second speaker will be Elder Saul Leacock, psychologist, counselor, and social worker, who will be speaking to us on psychosocial dynamics of sickness and recovery. The third panelist to speak to us this afternoon will be teacher, health enthusiast, and personal trainer, Brother Steve Codrington. And our final presenter will be Dr. Dougling, whose focus this afternoon will be the obesity, hypertension, diabetes trial, prevention, reversal, and control. After the presentations, which should take us to approximately 5 o'clock, you will be invited to engage with the panelists and ask them questions based on their presentations. So please make a note of your questions, and at the end of the presentations, raise your hands and I will call on you. At this time, before we hand over to our first speaker, I will ask Sister Flo Newton to give us our opening prayer.
Good afternoon to all. Let us bow for prayer. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be your wonderful name. We are extremely grateful to you for life, for on this Sabbath day and being able to worship, to learn of you. The word states clearly that you are interested in our soul's salvation, and you are also just as interested in our physical health. You're also interested in our mental health, all aspects of us, and you've made provision for it all. We are thankful that through Christ it can be attained, and you have invited us to come unto you that we may find rest and peace. And as we learn of you, we may also obtain the health needed in this sick world. We know that many suffer with various illnesses, various complaints, physical, some mental as well, emotional. But you have within your word the answers for all our problems and difficulties. May we learn to search diligently and understand the way in which you would have us be healed by your word. You're not just a willing God, but you are more than able to supply all our needs and to bring relief to us all. And so this evening, we invite your Holy Spirit to be present. Come and be with every speaker, be with the one moderating. Let your wisdom direct. May everything be presented clearly. May all be based on your word, so that as that word goes forth, it may not return void unto you, but accomplish all that you please and prosper in all who hear and receive that word. So guide, direct in the discussion, that everything may be in decency and order, and to the honor and glory of your name, and for the blessing and upliftment of everyone who listens. We thank you for hearing us in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Thank you for that opening prayer, Sister Flo. As mentioned earlier, we have 4 panelists who will speak to us for approximately 10 minutes. I now hand over to our first speaker, public health specialist, Dr. Carmita Dougling.
Good evening, everyone. For the next few minutes, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to give you a brief overview, very basic overview of our sick world. There's no doubt that we're living in a really, really sick world. I'm sure you heard it from the speakers this morning, both in the devotion and the divine hour message, how sick our world is. And I'm just going to show a few slides to highlight that. Now, in Genesis 1, In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and they were all perfect. And in verse 31, and God saw everything that he made, and behold, it was perfect. Can we have a lamb and a lion lying down together in this world? Sometimes we can't even have two people lying down together except there's some fight or some commotion. So we can see how the world has changed. There was disobedience from Adam and Eve. Sin entered, and therefore we saw the intrusion of death, disease, pain, suffering, emotional anguish. But God had a plan for us. He came and he died on the cross, and therefore there will be a new heaven and a new earth. But until then, we are living in a sick world. And from as early as Leviticus 11 and 15, God was trying to put things in place to deal with this sick earth. So we saw the sanitary laws and the first public health measures right back there in Leviticus. And we saw he started to identify the clean and the unclean foods. So nutrition came into play. And then there were also laws for maternal and child health, hygiene regulations, and the cleaning from molds and skin disease, etc. And there was even information on sexual health. So from very early, we saw public health laws coming into effect. Sanitation and hygiene, health inspection, quarantine. Some persons are only now hearing about quarantine in this pandemic, but from early Bible times, there was quarantine and there was isolation. There were dietary guidelines, sexual health. There was a work-rest balance where you rest on the Sabbath day and you work the other 6 days. So all of these things started right back in Bible times, but people wondered why disease came about, what it was coming from. And there were a lot of myths at that time, air and water and places. They were first known systematic endeavor to present the causal relationship between the environment and disease. So persons had a lot of theories coming up. They weren't all true, but some of them were better identified by scientists as we move through times. So there was the climate, the soil, the water, and the modes of nutrition. But for over 2,000 years, it was the basic epidemiological text that provided the theoretical understanding of endemic and epidemic disease. Right now, we're hearing about an epidemic which has become a pandemic. This is the coronavirus, all right? But then there were no fundamental change until the 19th century, when the new science of bacteriology and immunology came into effect. So persons didn't know where disease was coming from, but then there was the development of the microscope, and they saw these tiny little things, which they call bacteria. And then they started to understand that there is something causing the disease. And the Romans, however, the Roman slums, they were awful at that time, and they were overcrowded. All the streets stank of feces. So then the Romans started to say, you know what, we have to clean up the streets. We have to build aqueducts so that the feces would not be in the streets nor in the water. So all of these things started to come into play. And in the Middle Ages, between 500 and 1500, disease was seen as punishment for sin. Even if you read the Bible, sometimes there's still some idea that, you know, when your sins are forgiven, then all the disease would disappear. So that was the thinking at that time. And Rome, as we mentioned, was overrun, and Constantinople was the center of culture. But then there were the Greco-Roman legacy, which preserved Constantinople and transmitted to the Arabs, who reintroduced it back to the West. And then the Arabs and those who lived under their rule started to make some contribution to medicine and public health. Again, in 543, this is when we saw one of the first pandemics called the Plague of Justinian. And then in 1348, we saw Black Death, and millions of people were killed at that particular time. So communicable diseases was rampant throughout the first world at that particular time, and even up to today. We saw plague, smallpox, diphtheria, measles, and a whole set of diseases. And isolation and quarantine started to come into effect because we had leper houses. Even here in Barbados, we had a leper house, the Lazaretta, and persons were removed that were sick from the community and placed into isolation or quarantine. And the diseases in 1624 to 1689, we started to see a lot of acute febrile illness, but these fell into two categories: the endemic distempers and then the intercurrent diseases. So we had diseases like smallpox that was rampant. Even right here in Barbados, we saw smallpox. Okay, and then there were other diseases like scarlet fever, where people thought, it depended on the susceptibility of your body. But in the 19th century, we had two great giants, Louis Pasteur, who started to look at molds and look at different things and say, you know what, we need to pasteurize some things. That's how the word pasteurization came from, Louis Pasteur. So we need to sterilize things and get them clean. And then there was Robert Koch, who basically identified the germ theory and then start to look at a lot of different areas, bacteria, microscopes, and how to change things and make things better. So these were two of the people who we call the fathers of public health going forward. So over the years, we saw many different pandemics, not just in this first pandemic, but we had smallpox, which is a pandemic that killed millions of people. And it was extremely contagious. We had the bubonic plague, which was spread by rats moving from one country to the other by boats, all right? And then the Black Death, as I mentioned, TB is still very much with us, but all those cold countries that had TB started to travel to the Caribbean to get some sunshine. And then there was cholera. And in some places, we are still seeing cholera. But the Spanish flu killed a lot of people. The Spanish flu kind of mimics the COVID-19 now. It was that deadly and that contagious. Influenza is still very much with us every year. Influenza kills lots of people and lots of people become infectious. And HIV, we don't hear as much about HIV now, but the numbers are still pretty high in HIV. Ebola tend to center more around Africa, but Ebola is still very much. We probably only heard about Ebola when it reached the USA. And as soon as that issue was solved, you hardly hear about Ebola again, but it is still pretty much in Africa, it's endemic in Africa. But the SARS-CoV-2, there were actually three. There's a special coronaviruses that have jump species and that can become transmitted between animal and people. This is basically what SARS is. And this is the third one that we are seeing now. The first one was basically from China in 2002. And that one was thought to have been spread by the civet cat. And then in 2012 in the Middle East by the camel. And now this one is thought to have initiated from a bat. But again, all of those are speculations, really. So, but this emerged in Wuhan, China in 2019. And by March 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization declared it a pandemic and is still with us up to today and still causing issues up to today. And following that, now quick on our heels is the monkeypox. And monkeypox pretty much started small, like the coronavirus, and now is building up. Because right now, there are over 11,000 cases, and it only started on May 6th. monkeypox was around for over 30 years in Africa, but in Western and Central Africa, but not much talk was happening about monkeypox because it was in Africa and it was contained, endemic in those particular areas. But now with travel being so rampant, it's actually moved from Africa to the US. They saw a few cases in May, and then in the UK, they saw a few cases. And now today, well, I should say up to 2 days ago, there were 11,000 cases. So it is growing. And today, Barbados has actually confirmed our first case of monkeypox. So it means that monkeypox will soon be rampant throughout the Caribbean. But monkeypox is not as contagious as, let's say, COVID-19, but it doesn't mean that you can't get it, because as long as there's a rash and there's pox and you come in close contact with an individual, there's a possibility that you can contract it. So I would not dismiss it and say that, oh, it's not very contagious. It might not be as contagious as the flu, influenza, or as contagious as smallpox, because it kind of mimics smallpox, but it is contagious nonetheless. So if you have a lot of rubbing up together, then there's a possibility that you can also catch monkeypox. Okay. And I can say that there is a case confirmed in Jamaica, as well as a case confirmed in Bahamas. So at least these 3 Caribbean islands have already confirmed cases. There might be suspected cases in some of the others, but these have confirmed their 3 cases. If we look here, we can actually see a lot of the European countries that have, this is up to July 12. Monkeypox is the red. So it is starting to spread very, very quickly. Now, I mentioned a lot of the communicable diseases where we had spread from one person through droplet and touch and stuff like that. But then we had a transition from communicable diseases to non-communicable diseases. So as development came about, we started to understand about hygiene. We started to understand how to deal with bacteria and viruses and different germs. Then persons started eating offal. So we started developing the non-communicable diseases, which means that you don't catch it from somebody, but it is a lifestyle disease. And if we look here, we will see physical inactivity, alcohol abuse, tobacco abuse, and the big factor is unhealthy diet. We heard that from both Sister Flo this morning in the devotion and Sister Joan. Persons procrastinate a lot when it comes to eating healthy. They say, okay, I can start tomorrow or whatever, and they continue to eat badly. So when it comes to behavioral change, it is very difficult to get people to change their behavior from those poor diets to eating healthy diet. Sometimes it takes something like cancer, or it takes something like heart disease to get people to come to grips and to try to change. When we look at the burden of disease by cause in the world 2019, cardiovascular disease is by far the greatest burden, over 389 million people. And then cancers is the next second greatest burden. Then we look at neonatal disorders and respiratory infections, and then mental disorders. So mental disorders is still very much high up there and is being considered as one of the NCDs. So things like heart disease and stroke, diabetes, cancer, chronic lung diseases, and all the other NCDs are important. In Latin America and the Caribbean, about 10% of persons have cardiovascular disease, is about 10% cardiovascular disease, and cancer, diabetes mellitus, and mental health. So these are the diseases, 18%. All right, and injuries are still very much with us. and maternal and perinatal disorders, about 27%. So right in the Latin America and the Caribbean, we have in the worst of both worlds. We have the NCDs, and still we have some of those other things that really should be avoided, like injuries and maternal disease, etc. So that is the issue that we're facing. So we really are living in a sick world, and the more poverty we see, the sicker the world becomes. So a lot of the middle income and the poor countries have more disease than the developed countries. Now, as we move away from the communicable and the NCDs, we have the natural disasters in this world to deal with. So things like hurricanes, and right now we are in the hurricane season, and the Caribbean is really in the hurricane belt. So we can have a hurricane at any time. There are earthquakes. Places like Haiti had both hurricanes and earthquakes. Volcanoes, we just had some effects from St. Vincent, and we felt the effect right here in Barbados. And then there are landslides, there are floods, there are fires. So these natural disasters impact upon our world to help to make this a really sick world. And then to make it worse, there's environmental issues and pollution. And with climate change, there's coastal waters from waste disposal and ships, soil erosion, all different types of things. So if you just glance at my slide, you will see all of the natural disasters and the destruction that can happen. In climate change, we're seeing global warming. So the Earth is getting warmer every year. So we might not feel the impact right away, but places like Australia and some parts of the US, they're seeing natural grass fires. Places like the colder places are now getting hotter. So some of the animals would be having issues. So, and this is all about climate change. And violence. Now, violence is a public health problem. People don't like to admit it, but it is a serious public health problem. We can note the war in Ukraine and Russia that has been going on for a couple months now. That is still a major issue. Then there's mass murders, mass shootings. In the US, they had over 300 mass shootings for 2022. And just there in South Africa, about 2 weeks ago, we saw there was a mass shooting in South Africa where 15 people were slaughtered. Yeah, and we're seeing more and more mass shootings every day. People are getting more angry, and they're just using guns and taking it out on other people. Even here in Barbados, over the last 5.5 years, we had 196 murders, and 126 of these were by guns. But Barbados is not the capital of homicide. Jamaica actually is. Jamaica is actually number 2 when it comes to homicides in the world, the entire world. El Salvador is number 1 and Jamaica is number 2. And we have countries like Belize, which is a Caribbean country, which is at number 5. St. Vincent is 7, St. Kitts 8, Bahamas 11, Trinidad and Tobago at number 12. So when we look at homicide rates, we have a big issue in the Caribbean. And then there's also domestic violence, where men, for the majority of time, take advantage of women and children, but we can see it reverse as well. But so violence is a big public health issue and is a big issue in our world. So our world is a sick world. And now I just want to, as I wind down, look directly at Barbados. And we've seen a lot of sickness and death throughout the history of Barbados. Infant mortality was extremely high, but over the years, we were able to get it under control throughout the entire Caribbean. And this had a lot to do with the Moyne Commission. There was a Johnson report that was submitted, but it's not until after World War II, where we saw riots. There were a lot of riots in 1937 throughout the entire Caribbean because of the whole political system and because of the issues with disease and no proper medical care and treatment. So letters were sent back up to the UK, and they decided, yes, they will set up this committee and this commission by Lord Moyne called the Moyne Commission, and they would deal with some of these things. So then they started to put some public health matters in place, and we started to see some changes from those communicable diseases. But really and truly, lifestyle diseases is the major issue throughout the Caribbean. Occasionally, you would see a pandemic popping up, but it is really about lifestyle and how you can make those changes in lifestyle. So I just want to close with these two last slides. And remember, I'm just laying a platform so the other speakers can tell you how to get healthy. So all I'm dealing with is the sick world. So in the New King James Version, Matthew 24:6-8, in his Sermon on the Mount of Olivet, Jesus warned his disciples that they would hear of wars. And right now we're hearing of wars still and rumors of wars. See that you are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, like we're seeing now with both the monkeypox and the COVID-19 and the earthquakes in various places, volcanoes, etc. All these are the beginning of sorrows. So we can expect that this sick world, all of these things would happen. But in Isaiah 41:10, he says, so do not fear, for I am with you. Remember, Sister Jones said that Christ is the remedy. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. So in this sick world, there is hope, okay? And the other three panelists will tell you about some of the things, not for you to procrastinate about them, but things that you can take and that you can do, that you can get healthy in this sick world. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for that introductory presentation on living in a sick world. That was our first speaker, panelist Dr. Carmita Duglin. And now I introduce to you our second speaker, Elder Saul Leacock, who will be speaking to us on the psychosocial dynamics of sickness and recovery. Elder Leacock, are you ready for us?
Right, you can see me now?
Yes, we can see you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I got it now. Sorry. All right, thanks. Yeah, hold on. Okay. All right, good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to this program. This afternoon, I propose to touch on briefly for 10 minutes or so on the psychosocial dynamics of sickness and recovery. As you should be aware of, the word psychosocial means mind and social interaction. your interaction with individual, and we're looking at the dynamics of those when it comes to the causing of sickness as well as the recovery of sickness and disease. Psychosocial factors such as stress and hostility and depression, hopelessness and job control. All of these seem to be associated with physical health, particularly heart disease and other chronic diseases as well. Because as you know, when a person is sick, it affects the psyche, and the psyche, the mind, as well as the social factors, your relationship with people, and their health in general are interrelated, as it were. How these affect the physical and the mental health and the playing in the play that is involved is extremely critical. Now, how do psychosocial factors contribute to illness? Psychological factors impacting on individual can be as real as physical diseases. Now, sometimes we underestimate or downplay psychological factors, psychological damage that a person may be experiencing. There are some people who look at it this way. They say when you have a broken leg and the person is experiencing pain, you don't tell them, get over it. If a person has a depression, we tell them, it's all in your head, get over it. But when a person has a physical injury in a leg, or broken leg, or injured leg, you don't say, get over it, it's all in your foot. So physical diseases, as well as psychological diseases or injury, are real, and they are critical also in how people experience physical illnesses as well. Now, these psychological factors in the area of health, like drinking due to stress, making decisions about stopping smoking, a person's own ability to make these changes calls for determination, calls for motivation, and so on. So these psychological factors in health, like lifestyle, personality characteristics, and stress levels, impact on a person to the point where the person not only get depressed, but it also affects the physical body. It suppresses the immune system, and it impacts on the person negatively, even bringing disease upon the individual. The good book says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. And we have learned that when you have a cheerful, happy spirit and attitude, it stimulates the bone marrow to produce more white cells, which help to fight off diseases and infections. And a thing like depression can be very, very real and cannot easily be shrugged off, as it were. Just as we can't shrug off a pain or a leg injury or broken leg. They are real, and they impact on the person's psyche, and it can lead to physical problems as well, physical disease. And many of the diseases from which people suffer from are due to mental depression. And when you are experiencing mental depression, it has a whole impact on the entire body. I like to tell the story of, we call it sometimes psychosomatic diseases or psychosocial challenges, where a social worker held a party for some of her guests, and she was in the kitchen preparing a meal, but she wasn't sure if a particular, what they call that? We call it dog dumpling, not dog dumpling, particular mushroom, sorry, was edible or not. So she gave it to the dog. And after a few hours, nothing happened. The dog ate it up. And then she prepared to put the meal before all the guests, and they all ate it sumptuously. They enjoyed that meal. And then the cook, chief cook, came to the host, Miss Hughes, and said, Miss Hughes, the mushroom that you gave that dog is dead. And so Miss Hughes, to be true to her guest, told them that she had made the meal out of mushroom and she thought it was edible, but now she received the report that having fed the dog the mushroom, that the dog is dead. All kinds of symptoms started to occur with the guests. Some had headache, some vomited, some were so bad that they had to call the ambulance. But then Miss Hughes remembered that she herself had ate some, nothing had happened to her. So she ran back into the kitchen to ask the cook, show me the dog. And she said, Miss Hughes, you don't want to see that dog. That dog was struck and killed by the truck. And the moment she heard that, she said, well, I have to go back to the guests again, let them know how the dog really died. And when she went back to the guests and told them what really happened and how the dog died, all the symptoms disappeared that people were experiencing who had ate the particular mushroom. They even had to send back the ambulance without any casualty. That shows you the impact of mind over the body. And that is how most psychosomatic diseases impact on people. And that is also how people experience psychosocial damages because of what they may have done, because of the interactions with their family members, their spouses, because of all of those little things, because of lifestyle, personality, stress, particular characteristics that they have. And social factors mean they may not have any social support system, so they feel lonely and depressed. That itself affects people physically. Family relationship, some people can actually become depressed and they may actually want to commit because of depression, suicide. And the list goes on. The whole concept of psychosomatic, the mind has a tremendous influence over the body. So psychosocial health is defined as the sexual, the emotional, the social, the environmental. Even environmental issues can affect people to the point where it makes them sick physically, cognitive, religious, moral, and spiritual satisfaction of a person. All of these are the play and counterplay that is involved even in psychosocial dynamics, playing on the mind, affecting the body, and therefore making the person sick, depressed, or suppressing or depressing the immune system of the body. Even your neighborhood relationships, the environment, your healthcare access and quality, economic stability, even that affects people as well, and the social and community context. So those are some of the examples. So religion, your buying habits, your educational level, your family size, your structure, all of those play and interplay with each other. Poverty, unequal access to healthcare, lack of education, stigma, all of these, and even racism, all of these can affect the decisions you made. If you regret, can impute, can cause impact, guilt on a person's mind. And guilt can lead to a number of physical factors as well. A lot of it can be alleviated. Even a person who had difficulty forgiving, again, can be affected physically. One man, according to the Bible, was paralyzed, and they let him down in front of Jesus on a bed. And all Jesus told him was, son, your sins are forgiven you. And the man, Jesus told, take up your bed, arise, and walk. And the man was able to get up, take up his bed, and walk. He had a paralysis that was due to a lack of forgiveness because of guilt that he had incurred. So it's important to understand the quality of your relationship, the behaviors that you choose, your health care, the quality of the environment. All of these are the psychosocial dynamic that impact, that can even cause mental health issues as well. And when people had childhood abuse, for example, or even trauma by an accident or injury or failure to pass an exam, or even neglect or feeling abandonment or rejection, social isolation and loneliness, experience discrimination and stigma, and social disadvantage, poverty, I mentioned that, even bereavement, losing someone that is close to you. All of these things impact on your health. And now doctors and even scientists are discovering the importance of psychosocial, and they're including it in their evaluation of people's illnesses. Even the people themselves who are sick may be worried about whether or not they will get better, whether they will die, fear of death, and all of them. They have to be able to manage their stress levels and got to be stronger to cope with them. And they have to have a life with a purpose in order to be able to get better from it. So they are social, they are emotional, and they are psychological factors. Those are the dynamics they play and interplay that can actually contribute to sickness and disease. And they are real, much, much more real than just physical. The physical is the symptom, the manifestation of this mental, social depression. Very important, emotional. So these fall into a few categories to close. The personality of the patient and his life history, that is critical. The state of the patient's current interpersonal relationship with himself and his others, intra and interpersonal relationship, as well as the nature and characteristic of the process or the injury which they have. So there's a lot we can talk about when it comes to that area of psychosocial: anger, persistent sadness, irritability, excessive moodiness, changes in self-esteem, concern about their physical image and body image, their behavior, all of that. The treatment, simple. Having a positive mindset, spirit, and attitude, developing a sense of humor, smile and laugh, even if it's a fake smile. I'm not telling you to fake it, but even if you fake a smile, it can create a mood change. Listening to music, especially classical music, and learning to forgive and let go. These will help in the healing process of people who experience much sickness and disease, and they will contribute to the person's overall health, mentally and psychosocially. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you, Elder Saul, for that presentation on the psychosocial dynamics of sickness and recovery. I hope you were all taking your notes. We're moving now on to our third speaker, Brother Steve Codrington, who is a teacher, a health enthusiast, and personal trainer. He will be speaking to us on exercise and its positive effects on non-communicable diseases. So over to Brother Steve Codrington at this time.
Good afternoon to everyone. It's good to be here again. I will be speaking to you on exercise, which is a big passion of mine. And I will just read a little bit for you. I don't have a slides to present. I'll be reading something that I was written down. So I just want you to listen carefully, and then you will see why I have the passion that I do. I'm a mess, said Rosemary, a 31-year-old mother of 3. I've gained a lot of weight. I'm tired all the time, and I'm depressed. You used to be fit and energetic, I said. What happened? Since I had a baby, I've just been falling apart, Rosemary said. As I was taking a comprehensive history, I began to suspect that a large part of Cheryl's health problems stemmed from a single source. You're doing a lot of good things, I told her. Your diet is good. You have a positive attitude towards your family, and you're actively involved in a women's group to help you reduce your stress. However, you are not taking time out to exercise. There were a lot of things they could have done for her, such as give her herbs to try, medication and such, right? But I knew that until we got her moving with some simple exercise, we were not going to get the results that she needed and deserved. Rosemary, what type of exercises did you enjoy doing in the past? Even before you were married? I asked. I used to like walking and swimming, she answered. But you know, now with the children, I don't seem to find time for that. Are you willing to start back on 1 or 2 of these exercise programs? I asked. I'll do the walking, she replied. But I don't want to go swimming. At this point, I'm embarrassed by the 30 extra pounds I have put on over the last 5 years. So walking became the mantra. She started doing 10 minutes every other day for the first 2 weeks. Then she increased the time to 15 minutes, 5 times a week. 3 months later, Cheryl was doing 30 minutes of brisk walking 5 times a week. She had lost 10 pounds, so was feeling more energetic. And her depression had greatly improved. After just 3 months, she knew she still had a long way to go. But now she had the confidence and motivation to continue. I was certain she could take her health to a higher level. As an additional bonus, she has seen her relationship with her family improve. She was less irritable with her kids and husband, partly because she felt better about herself physiologically, and also because her vitality and energy were on the rise. I hope you heard that little story clearly. Exercise is essentially some form of movement. This ranges from walking to jogging, from biking to playing tennis, to riding, road tennis, football, whatever, and even resistance training, what we call weight training. Many people think of a gym when they hear the word exercise. For some people, this brings up images of large muscular men or women grunting and groaning as they lift weights. They equate exercise with painful exertion. My goal here is to get you motivated to exercise and then to select exercises that excite you. I also want you to realize that the benefits of exercise and what it can do for you physically and mentally. In addition, I want to give you a sense of what kind of exercises you may want to be doing. The first step in a successful exercise program is to get motivated. What will motivate you to get exercise? Think of the health improvements you can get by exercising. Also, think how the quality of your life will improve when you lose weight, gain muscle, and have an abundance of energy. With more exercise, many areas of your life can improve, including relationships and work. Exercise is also an effective way to increase sex drive and libido naturally in men and women. Next, think about what will happen if you don't exercise. See yourself as out of shape, having less energy, and your body falling apart. It's not a pleasant sight. Make up your mind right now that you will begin to figure out and implement an exercise program immediately. Feel good about it and get excited. I think it's a mistake to select an exercise that you don't really like. For example, a friend invites you to go jogging and you go. So you go, but you really don't have no interest in jogging. You would rather go swimming. If you pick an exercise that you don't have an interest in, you're not likely to stick with it. For an exercise program to be worthwhile, you have to stick with it over the long term. Studies show that if you abruptly stop exercising, you lose within a couple of weeks most of the benefits that you have gained. And I've seen people that I train in the gym, they're off for 1 week, probably had a hurt ankle or have a bad headache or something like that, or they lost a loved one or the work has them tied down. And when they come back to the gym after 1 week, they wonder, why can't I push the same way? Why can't I run as long on the treadmill? In just 1 week, your fitness level begins to drop dramatically. So exercise must be continuous. When choosing your exercise program, focus on aerobic work first. By this, I mean walking, jogging, biking, swimming, tennis, whatever. I do not look at working in the garden as really a whole lot of work, especially if you're not doing any forking. By contrast, there's also anaerobic exercise such as weightlifting, but it is secondary. For example, weightlifting can improve muscular strength, muscle mass, and bone density. It is also good for the heart and cardiovascular system. However, I recommend beginning with an aerobic exercise program first, and then adding an aerobic exercise like weightlifting later. A combination of cardiovascular training like walking or swimming or biking, plus some form of resistance training like weights is best. This works all the systems of the body. There are some people who only want to walk. And sometimes they walk so slow, not raising their heart rate at all, but they say they're walking every day and you see no obvious improvement in what they're doing. Don't feel you have to engage in vigorous physical activity to get the benefits of exercise. A study of 72,000 female nurses found that women who walk briefly 5 or more times a week cut their risk of heart attack by 50%. So get out of that bed early in the morning, that fresh air, and get your exercise in. The frequency and length of exercise depends on your current level of health. Your doctor and a fitness trainer, probably somebody like me, can best determine this. In general, moderately healthy people should start with 15 minutes or so of aerobic exercise 3 times a week and work up from there. Over time, the length of the exercise period can be increased to 30 to 45 minutes to an hour, and the frequency should be 4 to 6 times a week. If you experience muscle soreness and it just not seems to go away, then cut down the frequency and length of your exercise. But here's where nutrition plays a very important role, because if you're not eating properly and you're going back to eating junk after each exercise program, you are spinning top in mud, as Beatrice would say. If you're starting a weightlifting program, be sure to work with a personal trainer. Stop playing cheap. If you want some guidance, just have to ask me. Initially, muscle soreness will be the most common side effect as your body becomes accustomed to exercise. This soreness will become less of a problem after the first 3 weeks. I always tell people, give yourselves 3 weeks as a breaking period. Proper form is required for weightlifting. That is why I don't suggest anybody come in the gym and just say, oh, I know what to do, or going and looking at things that you see on YouTube and you come in the gym and you start them. Most of the time, as I look around, people who do not want to pay for a personal trainer or cannot pay for a personal trainer, you see them doing it wrong. So I am always available, very trained, to give you advice on what to do, whether you pay or not. Makes no difference. So I'm saying proper exercise form is important, otherwise injuries can occur. In addition, proper warming up and post-exercise stretches are important to prevent soreness and injury. So whenever you're ready, you can give me a call and we can talk about getting you on an exercise program that is sure to help your mood, help your health, and turn back, as I would say, the hands of time. Thank you.
Thank you. And for anyone who has been procrastinating, we have the opportunity tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock via Zoom and YouTube to join and have an exercise, a physical exercise activity. So 7 o'clock on this same Zoom platform and YouTube. And now we are on to our final speaker, Dr. Elliot Duglin, who will be presenting on the obesity, hypertension, diabetes trial, prevention, reversal, and control. And right after him, we will move on to questions from you who have been listening. Over to Dr. Duglin.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. Thanks to those speakers who have gone before. Thanks for the information. Well, I'm talking about the deadly trial, and I'm going to start with hypertension. Globally, that is worldwide, 1.28 billion adults between age 30 and 79 have hypertension. You heard that? 1.28 billion. And most of these hypertensives around the world live in low to middle income countries. 46% of adults with hypertension do not know that they have it. And every now and then you hear of a person with a sudden development of a stroke, or the development of a heart attack, or some other cardiovascular end point, and they are admitted to hospital, and they are found to have a very high blood pressure, and they never knew that they were hypertensive. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So 40% of adults with hypertension do not know that they have hypertension. And then less than half of hypertensive patients have been diagnosed or treated. And in fact, studies show that only 1 out of every 5 adults with hypertension have it under control. So high blood pressure is a major global problem. A lot of people have it and don't know. And of those who have it and know, only 1 in 5 are being controlled. It is a serious problem. So we can say, in fact, 1 out of every 4 adults in the world has hypertension, whether they know it or not. The thing about high blood pressure, hypertension, is that it is a risk factor for stroke, heart disease, whether we are talking about an electrical abnormality in the heart like atrial fibrillation, which is a completely decadent, erratic beating of the atria, and the ventricles try to follow. So it is like madness in the heart in terms of the beating. Coronary artery disease causing angina and heart attack, heart failure. All of these are caused by high blood pressure if not controlled. And as the years pass, then can cause stroke, heart disease, heart attack, heart failure, and even more terribly, chronic kidney damage, leading to end-stage kidney failure and the need to go on dialysis or be a candidate for kidney transplant if practicable and affordable. High blood pressure. So high blood pressure is a major global killer. The Americans call it a silent killer because a lot of people wait to find out if they have feelings for high blood pressure. When last did you get your blood pressure checked? Oh, my blood pressure is all right, my head feels good. That is the common talk in the Caribbean. You can't know what your blood pressure is by how your head feels. And it is important, as we shall see, that everybody should get their blood pressure checked at least once a quarter, once every 3 months, especially if you have risk factors. But people go for years and do not know what their blood pressure is, assume it is normal until a stroke strikes, or their kidneys are found to be collapsing, or there's a heart attack, or heart failure, or some other endpoint cardiovascular calamity. In terms of risk factors for high blood pressure, processed foods, of course, heredity, that is family history, obesity, the consumption of high saturated fat foods, the consumption of high saturated fat foods, tobacco, alcohol, all of those are risk factors for high blood pressure. And those risk factors increase the prevalence and also increase the incidence. Now, as we said before, hypertension is common. The incidence is increasing. It is being projected that by 2025, the number of people with hypertension will be even higher, greater than what we just said. Moving on to diabetes, in 2021, it was reported that there were 537 million adults between 20 and 79 years of age with diabetes, 537 million. 1 in 2 adults with diabetes, that is 50% of adults with diabetes, are undiagnosed and untreated. And diabetes accounts for 6.7 million deaths a year. For example, in 2021, diabetes accounted for 6.7 million deaths. You see the burden of these chronic diseases, and people, of course, were much more concerned with the viral pandemic, which killed much less numbers of people than these chronic diseases. And in fact, these chronic diseases were largely responsible for the deaths in the pandemic. So this is serious business. It is also estimated that 541 million adults globally are pre-diabetic and don't know or just ignore the fact that they are at an increased risk for diabetes. So diabetes and hypertension, very common in the Caribbean, very common in Barbados, very common globally. And the incidence and prevalence have both increased steadily since 1985, and especially since the year 2000. When it comes to obesity now, it is estimated that adults age 18 and over, 33%, that's about 1 in 3 adults over age of 18 globally, 33% are counted as obese. Whoa. 18.5% of children globally between the age of 2 and 19 are obese. 18.5% of children. So childhood obesity is a massive global problem. Here in Barbados, the Caribbean, and all around the world, childhood obesity. And it lays the foundation in childhood for trouble as they move up into adulthood. Obesity has a higher incidence and prevalence in women and certain ethnic groups. 4 out of every 5 African American women are overweight or obese. 3 out of every 4 Hispanic women are overweight or obese. Of course, obesity increases the level of chronic inflammation in the body, and obesity is a risk factor for hypertension, the same hypertension we talked about just now. It is a risk factor for heart disease as well, independent risk factor. It is an independent risk factor for stroke and kidney disease. And very importantly, obesity is at the foundation of certain cancers: breast, colon, uterine, there's endometrial carcinoma, ovary, and even prostate. So obesity, along with high blood pressure and diabetes, and in many people, the 3 of them coexist together and reap disastrous consequences in the person's health. Take, for example, here in Barbados, June the 1st, 2022, the Chronic Disease Research Center in the University of the West Indies made this startling announcement that in Barbados, there are 10 heart attacks per week and 2 strokes per day. 10 heart attacks a week and 2 strokes a day. This is alarming. And people don't hear about it. People don't care much about it. We are all occupied with other things and the pandemic, for example, that is viral. But 10 heart attacks per week and 2 strokes a day. And 90% of these 10 heart attacks per week and 2 strokes per day, 90%, the people have high blood pressure and do not know, didn't know. It means then that people must understand that they must take control of their health. You must get your blood pressure checked at least once every 3 months. If you are at risk, if you have a family history, even more frequently. You can buy a blood pressure monitor, just as how diabetics buy a blood sugar monitor, and learn to check your own blood pressure at home under relaxed conditions. That gives a better indication. And if your blood pressure is high, it should be dealt with. You should see your doctor and have it dealt with, because uncontrolled high blood pressure can suddenly cause a stroke, heart attack. Your kidneys are being eaten away in terms of the filtration mechanism. And as we say in the Caribbean, when you hear the shout, there is some calamity. Similarly, people should get their blood sugar done. The better test is the HbA1c. Again, at least twice a year, especially if you're at risk. If you are obese, if you are a tobacco smoker, if you drink alcohol, and in fact, we say you shouldn't be using tobacco or alcohol if you're not exercising, if you're under severe stress, you need to have your blood pressure and blood sugar monitored more frequently. Just do not assume that since you don't go to a doctor and don't know what is wrong, everything is all right. That is a philosophy that goes around among some so-called religious people. They think that to get checked is a lack of faith. That is folly. God has placed our responsibility for our health under our intelligent understanding to care for our health by doing what is best. And still, because we're in sinful fallen flesh, we must get checked to see what is happening, because you can be doing your best and something can still go wrong, let alone not doing anything and not checking. So getting your blood pressure checked, getting your blood sugar checked, everybody should be checking their weight, and you should know if that weight is too much to work on it. And therefore, we say exercise more. We heard already from the exercise talk, half an hour a day, 5 days a week. Reduce your intake of sugar, refined flour, and dangerous fats. Avoid the processed, refined processed foods. Eat more fruits and vegetables, more whole food whole, and eat smaller quantities, because once you reach adulthood, you don't need a wash pan of food. You need better protective food, like the vegetables and the green leafy vegetables, the cruciferous vegetables. Make sure you have enough fiber in the whole grains, good protein sources without dangerous fats. We recommend lentils and so on and so forth. Peas and beans, of course, they must be thoroughly cooked to reduce the lectin content, which for some people may be a problem. Adequate rest, coping with stress, relaxation, and remember the importance of getting checked. Women getting their breast checked, men getting their PSA checked, everybody getting their blood pressure and blood sugar and cholesterol checked at least a number of times a year if you are at risk, even more frequently, because this is alarming that in Barbados we have 10 heart attacks a week and 2 strokes a day. Most of these people have very high blood pressure and didn't know because they refused to go and get it checked, or if they don't want to go and get it checked, buy a monitor and check it themselves at home, which is a recommendation. You would have heard Dr. Connell, our hypertension expert here in Barbados, and you would have heard Professor Clive Landis and the others at Chronic Disease Research talk about these alarming things, and that people need to take their own health under their own responsibility to be checking, to be monitoring, and then to be changing lifestyle, exercising, eating healthy, and avoiding tobacco and alcohol, and making these right choices. We can't depend on the government to make right choices. The government can facilitate, but ultimately the individual must choose to eat and drink right, to exercise, to cope with stress, to check on certain things, and to be proactive rather than reactive. This kind of statistic, 10 heart attacks per week and 2 strokes a day, this is absolutely ridiculously alarming. and too many premature deaths. Too many people then in their 40s, 50s, and 60s from high blood pressure and its consequences, from diabetes and its consequences, and from obesity and its consequences. And that is very serious. It is a tremendous cost to government for the tertiary care, that is the hospital care of these diseases and their complications. Government has to spend money that it doesn't have still to lose the case. That is, the patient still dies prematurely. And therefore, it comes down to what we've been stressing a long time. And in our health focus, we stress this: act now and reduce your risk. And that acting now involves the lifestyle change, eating healthy, exercise, rest, avoid tobacco, avoid alcohol, being temperate and self-controlled, not overindulging, watching your body weight, getting it into its ideal bracket, coping with stress. We say in the New Star lineup, relaxing, trusting God, and do your best and not allow any worry to dominate you. And then getting your checks. Just don't drift along and don't know what your blood pressure is until you get a stroke or a heart attack. Getting your checks. Buying an instrument to check your blood sugar and your blood pressure. Individuals are now being recommended to do that, or check with your physician to get these checks at least every quarter, to make sure that things are not slipping out of control and you don't know, and you assume everything is all right, an assumption that is folly if you are not checking, and then all of a sudden a stroke, a heart attack, blood test shows your kidneys are collapsing, and you wonder why. Well, it means by doing frequent checks, we can be on top of knowing when things are beginning to slide so that corrections can be made. And then by changing our lifestyle and eating healthy, both in terms of quantity and quality, exercising, getting rid of excess fat, trusting God and relaxing, we can do a lot to prevent and reverse the scourge of these three killers: obesity, hypertension, and diabetes, causing and wreaking havoc in Barbados, the Caribbean, and globally. While people are focused on a viral pandemic, these three are not only causing their own deaths, but causing most of the deaths when the virus comes a knocking, because they dysregulate the immune system, they create chronic inflammation, and they make the person more susceptible to even death by an ordinary flu, let alone coronavirus. So these three killers, we need to understand they are prevalent in our society. They're killing a lot of people. We need to get checked, and we need to change lifestyle to prevent and reverse. I thank you.
Thank you for speaking to us on prevention, reversal, and control of obesity, hypertension, and diabetes. Now it is a time for our audience who have been listening so attentively without interruption to ask their questions. I see someone has their hand up already. If you have a question, please raise your hand if you're on Zoom and I will call you. If you do not know how to raise your hand, you may leave a comment in the chat indicating that you would like to ask a question and I will also call you. If you're on YouTube, you can leave your question in the YouTube chat and I will relay the question to the panelists. Or you can join us on Zoom at 393-840-7674. iPad, you had your hand up. You have your hand up. Please go ahead and ask your question at this time.
Good evening. I have several questions for each of the panelists, and thank you for the health presentation. This is for Carmita. The question that I'm asking may be a twofold question in one answer. Is the plagues in the Bible caused by human enactment, or did God saw what people would cause upon the earth, or is these plagues a result of sin?
I am going to refer that question to Dr. Elliot Douglin.
Dr. Douglin, you heard the question?
Yes, okay, thank you. The question is, Well, first of all, as Christians who are Bible-believing Christians, we know that sin is the root cause of everything bad. The Bible tells us every good and every perfect gift cometh down from the Father of lights, James 1:17, with whom there is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. So nothing bad comes from God. Our choices to depart from God's way, physically, socially, morally, and in every respect, has the consequences we call evil or disease. And of course, at certain particular times, because of deliberate sin and turning away from God, God has withdrawn, moved back from those who do not want him, because since he's the God of love and freedom, he cannot force himself where he's not wanted. And when he gives people up, a term used there is justice, he gives them up to their choice and withdraws his protective care because he's not wanted and he cannot violate the principles of freedom. Well, trouble strikes. So however you look at it, it is the sin problem, people's wrong choices, and the separation sin makes between the creation and God that is the basis of any calamity at any time and any sickness at any time. I hope
This
the answer.
Okay. This question is for you, Dr. Duggan. What if someone have hypertension and they don't want to use the regular medication, that is there natural things that they can use to lower the blood pressure?
Okay, that's a common question people ask if they have high blood pressure and they do not want to use the pharmaceutical medications, if they're natural things they can use. Well, let me approach it this way. If you are diagnosed with high blood pressure, first of all, there are lifestyle changes that should be made that are recommended by the American Heart Association, for example. Alcohol must go, tobacco must go, weight loss encouraged, cutting out the sugars and the refined processed carbohydrates, eating a lot more vegetables, drinking water instead of the various sweetened beverages, reducing the salt intake. And sometimes a trial of 6 weeks to 3 months on that kind of change, and using more green leafy vegetables and certain vegetables like Christophine and parsley and so on, you will find that with that lifestyle change, a person's blood pressure may come back to normal. Now, if when the diagnosis is made, the blood pressure is very high and it is checked and rechecked and very high, well, along with that lifestyle change, it is advised that some kind of medication be used, because that kind of high blood pressure, while the person is dilly-dallying about how to approach it, the blood pressure may approach another endpoint and cause a stroke. So yes, lifestyle change, if adhered to, can improve blood pressure. And then there are certain herbs that can be incorporated in that lifestyle change: hawthorn berry, pine bark extract, grapeseed extract, for example, and berberine and others, within the context of healthy eating, exercise, reducing stress, reducing salt, and giving that lineup a trial of 6 weeks to 12 weeks, as the American Heart Association recommends a lifestyle change. And we can prevent trouble. We can reverse a pure diet, coming off a lot of the fried, greasy, processed stuff, and eating a pure diet can, of course, control or even reverse weight loss. Sometimes a person, by losing 20, 30 pounds that they had in excess, can bring that blood pressure back to normal. By exercising, by cutting down on salt, by eating a lot more green leafy vegetables and cutting out the processed food, all of that can help. If, and it's very important, even if medication is being used, that lifestyle approach is very important. But if the blood pressure is of such a nature in its height that medication is recommended, that medication should be adhered to and the blood pressure monitored, so it comes down to the range of 120/80 or 110/70, where there is going to be a removal of the risk for stroke heart attack, and kidney damage, because it is important to prevent those complications.
Thank you, very helpful. And this one is for Saul. This is my last question. And it's more mental, what's going on here in the US, and what do you do in the case of the pandemic when all around you people are getting sick and dying? What are some of the things you can do?
We have known so far that the pandemic has led to some mental depression in many individuals as well as children. And many of them have stayed indoors, bored, and they have had nothing to do, and they have felt guilty. And there are times when they feel that they have experienced loneliness and depression. Those are to be substituted by a positive attitude, using your time wisely and listening to wholesome music, reading or watching things that may be humorous. All of that is to stimulate the brain, the thinking, and help change the mood as well as the attitude, all to combine. Finding things to do, to be engaged in. It is said that Satan finds work for idle hands to do. And during this pandemic, many people have remained indoors for fear of contracting the virus, for fear of experiencing the symptoms alone, for fear of death. All of us experience fear of death. But those things really do suppress the immune system or depress the immune system, and they help to pave the environment for disease and suffering and sickness. So I would encourage a cheerful countenance. I will encourage reading, doing wholesome activity, because even when you feel bored, there's nothing to do, you feel guilty, or you blame yourself for something along that line. It's the way how the human mind works. Even if you have good intentions, they can work in a positive direction. But when you have no intentions and no goal, and you're doing nothing, and you're at home and you are bored, or you find yourself watching or listening to things that are not healthy. And by not healthy, I mean the appetite, the diet is not right. And the diet, is not only what you eat. Your diet is what you feed your mind upon, your thoughts. Your diet is what you read, what you listen to. All of that is involved in your diet, because the mind is being fed with either things that are positive or negative, leading to healthy or unhealthy results. So there are many things that have happened during the pandemic. People are now coming out and becoming more interpersonal, more active, and more engaged, as it were. And that is going to produce a good effect upon the mind. Even students felt bad that they couldn't go to school, and many of them were depressed as well. So I want to let you know that there were many impacts upon individuals during the pandemic, but there were also some positive that could have been done, which would have enhanced during that period of time in their interactions with people. Even if they couldn't go out, they could call, they could write, they could text, and they could still maintain their friendships and so on. And all of those interpersonal and intrapersonal relationships do help to boost the person's morale as well as the person's mood and attitude. And that spells a lot when it comes to not giving in to disease or sickness. Hope I answered the question.
Yes, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next hand that I see is Brother Broom or Sister Broom. I believe it's Brother Broom. And then we have Denali McKnight. And then we have some questions also on the YouTube chat.
I just want to ask a question in relation to high processed foods. As the world has shifted apparently to this high processed food, as a source of that. Even among vegetarians, we also have shifted to high processed foods like hot dogs, wham, those types of things. And in the manufacture of these foods, there's a lot of salt, a lot of things that are detrimental to the health. So my question is, it appears as though these processes is resulting in serious health outcomes. So how can, as vegetarians, we deal with this whole process of processed foods? Because you shift from one thing to the next, and you're basically in the same boat. So just a question on that.
Who is this directed to?
Well,
Dr. Duglin?
well, it could be Dr. Duglin, could be the two Dr. Duglin, because you deal with a sort of change in that from when we were smaller, and young in the old 60s and 70s. There was a more reliance on ground provisions and so on. You eat meat, but you ate, even the feeding of the animals were quite different than now. You cut grass, you had canned tops, and you feed the animals with that type of thing. You're shifting now to mass production. You're shifting with a different type of source of food for animals, treating completely different. So I'm just wondering if that shift seemed to have resulted in a considerable amount of disease and so on. I mean, even vegetarians sometimes are, seem to be not to be able to get over these processed foods. So any two of them could answer.
Okay, thank you.
Well, first of all, not all processing is bad. For example, let me give you an example of a processing that is good. If tomatoes are cooked and then crushed to form tomato paste, that is a good good processing, because you're going to have more bioavailability of the lycopene and chlorogenic acid and all of the good things in that. What we're talking about is ultra processed, ultra refined carbs and meats. The European Union announced several years ago, and it just reiterated it, that all the refined meats, luncheon meat, ham, bacon, all the refined processed meats increase the risk for cancer. And the refined processed carbs increase the risk for hypertension and diabetes and obesity. And now when it comes to vegetarian products that are processed, some of them are processed quite healthily. A lot of them are processed with too much salt, too much additional fat. And then this is where you're reading the label on the can or the package is important. I like, though, the public health doctor there on 3ABN, his name just slipped me, who said, when you eat whole food whole, you don't have to worry to read labels, because when you take a potato out of the ground, you don't have to read how much sodium is in it, because it has none. You don't have to read how much saturated fat has been added, none has been added. So eating whole food whole, your fruits and veg and ground provisions as they have been created by the creator, eating whole food whole and natural is the best way to go. If you're going to use processed foods, look for your labeling and make sure that the fat and salt content are healthy and within certain specified limits. Because to be practical, we know that people are on the go and on rushing, and it might be easier to open a can of something rather than get a sweet potato and do something with it. So to be practical in today's world, you will have to use some processed stuff. Just read the label and make sure that your salt and fat and so on are at the recommended level. But the ideal position is to eat naturally whole food whole.
If I can just add, Brother Peter, a lot of times as vegetarian and vegan, people want to, the taste buds have changed, and people still want to eat like they were meat eaters. So that is a major issue. And Dr. Douglin, he hit the nail on the head, but I just want to say that a lot of us still want to use whether it's the Big Franks and those things that taste good, because our taste buds have been adulterated. So what we need to do is to change from that quote unquote sweet food and eat the more natural foods. Take, for instance, I have decided that for supper, I'm having only popcorn, but I don't use salt. So I would just add a little black pepper, a little nutritional yeast, and that would be supper. And that is popcorn only. So you don't have the salt taste, you don't have the caramel taste, none of those. But you know that that is something that would not lead to hypertension or diabetes or anything like that. But you're popping pop by pop, and therefore you're being a little satisfied and you're finished with that. And you can have fruit as well. So you have to re-educate your taste buds when you become a vegetarian and when you want to eat properly. And I think a lot of persons still have to get to that stage.
Does that satisfy you, Brother Broom?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Denali.
Hi, good evening. I have a question for Dr. Douglas, right? So when I went to the doctor last, they told me I was pre-hypertensive. And when I check my blood pressure these days with a home machine, I see that the systolic blood pressure is high. It's about between 140 and 130, kind of high. But the diastole is between 70 and 60. What is the reason for that, or why is that happening?
Well, we have to get some information to make a good assessment of that. You are a young man, I gather from you're in which age group? You're under 30?
Yeah, I'm 20.
Right. So well, that is important, because you would only expect the systolic blood pressure, the top number, to be going up in elderly people because of age-related stiffness of the arteries. If it is going up in a young person, that is quite significant in terms of concern. It would mean that your doctor would have to do certain other tests to rule out any what we call secondary causes of hypertension, make sure your kidneys are all right. There's not something called a Conn syndrome or pheochromocytoma or any other secondary issues. Once those are ruled out by your doctor, then one would have to focus on your diet, lifestyle, body mass index, things like that. Because certainly in the 20s or 30s, your systolic blood pressure should not be going up, leaving the diastolic where it is down. At your age, and a person in 20s and 30s, blood pressure should be 110/70, right there, nice and low. And if the top figure is going up, the doctor would have to investigate to rule out what we call secondary causes of high blood pressure, endocrine issues, renal issues, other disease issues, which we can't go into, of course, on a thing, but your doctor will have to rule out those. And if they're ruled out, a careful look at diet, body mass index, lifestyle, and noting that would indicate arterial stiffness at a very young age, which would be quite concerning. So that is the best I can say at that, because it shouldn't be happening at a young age that your systolic is going up. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, before we have the other hands on Zoom, a few questions from YouTube. Someone is asking where the fitness instructor is located. That'll be Brother Steve. And where is the health fair being held? So Brother Steve, if you can let us know. I know he's in St. Philip sometimes, but I don't know where he's based in terms of doing his training. So you can let us know in the chat, or you can take the mic after I'm finished. And the health day tomorrow is being held at True for the Final Generation Church in Bailey's Redmond's Village, St. Thomas, Barbados. The other question is, and this will be for Dr. Douglin, what are the signs as a diabetic or otherwise that a person's kidneys are getting damaged? Dr. Douglin.
Yes, good question. Important question, because you can't wait for signs. A person who's diabetic, their doctor should be doing what is called a microalbuminuria test, a test for leaking of small amounts of protein, albumin in the urine, by doing a test called the ACR, the albumin creatinine ratio, and by also getting the glomerular filtration rate done at certain intervals. So if your doctor is checking for protein leakage in the urine, and your doctor is checking as to how your glomerular filtration rate, how the kidneys are filtering the blood, and keeping a check on those, well, long before there are any signs or symptoms, the doctor will be able to detect if the diabetes is beginning to impact on kidney function at a time when it can be reversed by vigorous control of the diabetes and certain both natural and pharmaceutical approaches to protect the kidney. If you wait until there are signs and symptoms that the kidney is in trouble, that is too late. That is why all doctors are told in their training that a patient who's a diabetic should have a test for the leakage of a small amount of protein at least twice a year, and a check of the glomerular filtration rate similarly twice a year, to make sure that you pick up any early strain on the kidneys when the situation can be reversed. And at that early stage, there are not going to be any signs or symptoms. The kidney has a tremendous reserve. It is only when 60% of the capacity of the kidney has been written off that the serum creatinine begins to rise into dangerous levels. So you can't wait for signs and symptoms. You want to be early looking at protein leakage and the glomerular filtration rate, so that things can be reversed early and dealt with early, rather than waiting for something to happen. Here in the Caribbean, we like to wait for signs and symptoms of things. No, you want to deal with things long before any sign or symptom come, because usually a sign or a symptom indicates a far advanced situation.
Okay, thank you. And Brother Steve, if you could let us know where you're located or how we can reach you if we would like to reach you, we'd appreciate that.
Anybody can give me a call at 253-4798. That's my number again, 253-4798. I also train in Wildy at a gym called Chameleon Combat Fitness. This is the building opposite the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic. But if you prefer to do beach training, there are some days we do beach training, maybe on Tuesdays or Thursdays. Those are the only 2 days. But you can get in contact with me. But what I will do, I will sit down with you and go through a little talk with you and see where you are at, what are your goals for yourself. People always say that they want to exercise, but they don't know how to go about doing it. I remember once a guy came to the gym and visited me. But he visited the gym and he said, boss man, I want this belly down. He had a huge belly. And I just took one look at him and seeing the puffiness in his face, which Dr. Douglin talked to us about many a time. This puffiness around the eyes, face swollen, face shining. And I knew right there and then that he was having issues with his heart and such like. And then I asked him one simple question. Are you prepared to give up drinking? He said, I could stop eating the fast food. I could start walking and such like. But when it comes to my beers, I can't stop. I love a beer. So that's one hindrance you're gonna have dealing with people who consume alcohol, because they will tell you right off the hand. I don't really drink. I'm a casual drinker, but they're casually drinking beer every day, casually drinking drinks every Friday. Once they get paid, they're heading straight for the shop to drink some beers with the boys. Tonight now, it'll be Saturday night, more beers again. I only drink one or two when you check the bottles on the ground. It's a whole case. So they do not come off for drinking. The same thing even applies to people who say that they are eating healthy. We have heard through Dr. Duggan more than once that sugar is really a poison. The Asians do not want to accept that because we came out as slaves dealing with sugar plantations and putting sugar to everything that we have. The Asians do not want to accept that sugar is dangerous. I have come to that understanding and I avoid using any form of sugar. But you will hear people look at you and tell you, so you're gonna die. You think you can live forever? And they always drop that remark as if they're getting back at you. But the reality of the situation is we do not need to use added sugar in anything at all. I had a problem last year, as little as last year, where I had bleeding on the left side of my brain. I will tell anybody about it. What I did, cut out all forms of sugar completely. My weight dropped from 255 to 218 pounds. You can testify to this, Dr. Duggan. I went on the steps, I walked. My drink was water, and it still is water. I have gained a few pounds back to like 223, 224, but it will never go back up to 255 because I am keeping away from sugar. My blood pressure was always 140 something over close to 100. Now it is down to like 116 over 65. Why? Because I am keeping away from sugar. My children will have birthdays and they will toast with non-alcoholic wine. I toast with water. I am sticking to my plan. I am not going to transgress and go back to where I was before and find myself in the same situation. We have to be serious. You cannot gradually get to health. You have to run fast and get there. Otherwise, by the time you get there, you're going to be dead. Thank you.
Thank you. We will take one last question from the YouTube platform because we have a few hands on Zoom and then we will get back to YouTube. Sister Kiva May is asking, how would we engage our community to have healthy checks at least once a year? And if we do manage to get them to have healthy checks at least once a year, will the polyclinics be able to handle the increase in numbers if it is implemented? I believe maybe Dr. Karamita, you can answer this.
Yes, thank you. Actually, right now, we're encouraging them to have with our health focus. This year, we haven't done a lot of advertising on radio, but we've been sending out our flyers to encourage people to come. And once they attend our health focus, we usually have Dr. Duggan there and Elder Saul is usually there. And if there is an increase in their glucose level or increase in their blood pressure level, we usually allow them to see the doctor and he would recommend them to go to their either private physician or to go to the polyclinics to be seen for continuous assessment, because it doesn't make sense just getting a check once a year. You need to get quarterly checks and assessments, and you also need to get advice. And what we do at the Health Focus, we advise them on how to eat, how to reduce the use of salt. If the cholesterol is high, we tell them about things that they can eat to reduce the cholesterol. If the blood pressure is high, again, we tell them about reducing salt and certain things they can use. And if the blood sugar is high, again, we tell them about reduction of sugar and a lot of the carbohydrates and stuff and what they can use. So apart from information on lifestyle, we also channel them to make sure that they have ongoing quarterly checks. So that is important. So I don't think it is too much for the polyclinics, but you can do private or you can do polyclinic, but it's important to make sure that you manage your health and don't just ignore everything.
Thank you. Brother Adrian Carter, it is your turn to ask your question. And just remember that we all have to keep our questions as short as possible.
All right. This question is really for Steve. What are different workouts you can do at home in order to gain muscle?
Brother Adrian, we can speak to that. You can call me at any time and we can go through a program that is suitable for you. But what I will tell you, the first thing you got to do to gain muscle is to get up.
Okay.
If you're laying down all the time, it will not work. If you're always sitting down in front of the TV, it will not work. There's no exercise you can do while watching TV or while laying down on your phone. None of that works. And you have to get up and get out of the house. People have come to this idea that because of the pandemic, you can stay at home and get exercise. It really and truly will last for a very short time, and it doesn't really work. Next thing, you need a support group. Doing these things on your own, you lack motivation to do it. You must get a group of persons who are interested in being healthy, and you must get somebody to call you, or you must call somebody, get together the team, call one another, and push one another. Individual persons do not generally like exercising by themselves, except for me. Nobody has to motivate me to get up. I know where I am getting up. But most people on the planet Earth, even in Barbados, will not move a muscle on mornings unless they are forced to.
All right, thanks.
El Crony, you're the next person.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
My question would be for Brother Dr. Douglin. I read a statement some time ago. I believe it came from a publication called Harvard Health. And it was saying that throughout life, heart attacks are twice as common in men than in women. I want to find out if that is actually true. And if it is true, what would be at least one reason why this would be so? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We have known for a long time that in premenopausal women compared to men in that same age group, men are more prone to heart attack than females. The female sex hormone estrogen offers them a considerable measure of protection. After menopause, when estrogen levels fall, then the female incidence of heart attack will then begin to approach that of the male. So it has to do with mainly the hormone, and the hormone, the estrogen, protects the woman's coronary arteries from the kind of atherosclerotic assault that men may have. Of course, having said that, we know that there are some women who may consume a lot of high fat, high cholesterol stuff and smoke and still can get heart attacks premenopausally. But in general terms, the female estrogen offers some protection so that men are more prone to heart attack than females before the female menopause, as a general statement.
Okay, thank you.
Dexter McKnight, you were next in line to ask your question.
Good afternoon. This question is directed to Dr. Douglin. Can consistently going to bed late, can that alone cause someone to suffer with high blood pressure?
Yes. Not getting enough sleep at night is now regarded with evidence as a risk factor for hypertension, increased risk for stroke, heart attack, diabetes, even an increased risk for cancer. It can throw the whole endocrine metabolic system out of whack. So yeah, definitely consistent lack of sleep can push the blood pressure up. So the answer there is yes, and that is why a good 7 to 8 hours sleep at night is part of the preventive lifestyle health message. sleeping when the nights come. You will notice in the Caribbean too, and in Barbados, we notice now, a lot of people who are being shot at late hours, 12 o'clock, 12:30 at some bar, 1 o'clock. When I was growing up, my mother used to tell me that at 12:30 or 1 a.m. in the morning, after midnight, even a mule is asleep. And when human beings are not sleeping at that time, they get shot. They get all sorts of trouble. And then back to your question, yes, lack of sleep when the night comes can push your blood pressure up, the systolic blood pressure at that.
Thank you.
Mr. McKnight? Okay, you're welcome.
Yes.
And Charles, you may go next.
Good afternoon, everyone. This question is directed to Sister Kamita because about a while ago, I heard her mention something about black pepper, and in my family, I always learned that black pepper was not really a good thing. So I want to know which kind of black pepper she's talking about. If it's a particular kind of black pepper that we are allowed to use, or something like that.
Again, I'm going to redirect this to Dr. Duglin, but I don't think that there's anything wrong with black pepper, cayenne pepper, some of these peppers. They're actually very beneficial. But seeing that he is specialized in herbs, I will turn this one over to him. Okay, so Dr. Duglin, you can answer this one.
No, but in fact, before I comment, I will let Brother Steve, who is a turmeric, black pepper extract man, comment.
Interesting. Can everybody hear me?
You don't refer to me though.
Everybody hear me? I have realized from listening to Dr. Duggan over the years, I was very disobedient. But after having gone through a series of troubling health experiences, I've learned that it's better to be safe than sorry. I love to mix my turmeric with ginger and black pepper. The reason being is that black pepper allows turmeric to be more bioavailable to the body. And without the presence of turmeric, it contains something called piperine. And some people even extract it out and use it by itself, but I like to use the whole black pepper powder or the crushed black pepper itself. With my formula that I'm making, I like to use a lot of anti-inflammatory products. As we get older, inflammation level rises. That's where we get back pain, that's where we get joint pains, knee pains, headaches, all sorts of things happen to us. And I have found that by keeping your inflammation levels low, your body has less pain. The black pepper that is used is the same black pepper you're talking about, ma'am, but that black pepper contains a substance that is useful in increasing the bioavailability of the turmeric into the getting past the blood-brain barrier and helping to bring your inflammation levels down. Dr. Duggan can expand upon that some more if he wishes to.
Okay, thank you, Brother Cotrington. Yes, the piperine in black pepper enhances the absorption of the curcumin of turmeric.
Correct.
The other things that can enhance it too, like ginger, and using the turmeric with other whole herbs and blending it can actually enhance the absorption. We're not talking about excessive use of the black pepper, the person who asked the question. Some people with the excessive use of some of the peppers may get stomach irritation and so on. As you know, cayenne contains capsaicin, which actually in moderate amounts is good to reduce risk of clotting and certain cancers. And black pepper contains the piperine, which enhances the absorption of curcumin. So those two in moderate amounts are in fact good.
Okay, thank you. We now go to Chernelle Dick Brazil, who, by the way, is my personal friend from St. Vincent. So go ahead and ask your question, Chernelle.
Thank you so very much. Excellent job, moderator. And it's a pleasure to be here. Everyone did such a great job. It's very informative and interesting. And round of applause to everyone. My question is that regards to insomnia, it's similar to a question that went on before. I was wondering if insomnia is like a prelude to mental health challenges, and what kind of natural remedies can be used to ensure that one gets adequate amount of sleep. Thank you.
Anyone in particular you wanted to direct that question to? Perhaps it could be a combination of Elder Soliko and Dr. Duglin.
Repeat the question for me.
Go ahead, brother.
Sure, no, you will have to repeat that question again.
She was a little low.
And speak a little louder.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Elder
A little better,
Soliko.
but not clear. I can hear Kara J clear. Go ahead.
All right, well, I'll let her repeat, and if you don't hear her, I'll repeat it for you.
Right.
I was wondering if insomnia is a prelude to mental health challenges. And I was also asking for natural remedies to ensure that adequate sleep is derived so that we can get the 7 to 8 sleep as indicated by Dr. Duglin. So basically about insomnia and what can be done to alleviate persons who having insomnia related issues, and if it's related to mental health challenges.
You want me to repeat
Any of
it?
the mental health challenges are either they're either stimulated, but they all start in the brain. If there's a chemical imbalance or anything of that nature. But when there are situations that impact negatively on the feelings, the emotion, that is where you get that negative feedback, negative consequences. You mentioned insomnia, lack of sleep. Sometimes that can be due to psychosocial factors, like things you're worrying about, or maybe some situation that is causing stress or mental depression. But some of the natural remedies will involve some exercise, positive thinking, some simple herbs which can induce sleep, some deep breathing exercises, and prayer. Those are some things that I recommend for individuals suffering from insomnia. Of course, you said natural remedies, people use other things. So positive outlook, exercise, some nice wholesome music. There's some music that is very good for as a tonic for sleeping. And then there are certain herb teas that are relaxing for the nerves and so on. Some people get up and do a moderate exercise in the night. They do stretching, deep breathing exercises also work. And that is for the insomnia. The mental challenges, all depends on the level at which it is at, would have to be prescribed by a doctor if they have a certain nature. But as I said, if you're looking for natural remedy, those are the ones that I recommend.
Okay, thank you. And does anyone know any teas or such things that would help with the sleeping?
Well, what I can add here is that my son uses chamomile tea that was recommended to him by Dr. Duglin to help him to get a more restful night rest. As a rule, I don't use any chamomile tea to get my rest. After work, I know so hard, I am knocked out in a hurry. So I ain't to get a chance to bathe. I am that sleepy. What I can tell you as a teacher for the last 34, going 35 years, growing up in the teaching profession, and we had our lunch, we realized that most of the time the school meal that I serve is of a high carbohydrate nature. And then you have what Belgians call negatives after eating this meal because there's so much starch in your food and the blood sugar level rises dramatically. Your head is on the desk soon after lunch because you tend to wash down that food with a soft drink. But over the years growing up, I have realized that that was a very stupid practice that I had. Belgians on the whole, Barbadians I should say on the whole, have this practice of eating and drinking together. And whenever they drink, they usually invariably wash down, as we call it, the food with carbonated drink, which contains far too much sugar in one bottle for the entire day. As a ruler here, teacher is telling me, but I'm so tired at 3 o'clock, but now it's 2 o'clock. They're so tired at 2 o'clock, even to get home an hour earlier now. They're so tired that they have to go home and sleep. And most of the people that I train in the gym are teachers now because they have come to the realization that going home after work, saying that you are tired, that you have to get sleep is not the best option. And they have realized now that if you go and exercise right after work, whether you're going to the park, whether you go and lift weights, whatever you go and walk on the road, whatever, you will find that the energy you thought you did not have, you actually have. It is not sleep that you need after leaving a sedentary job most of the time. It is exercise that your body needs because as you exercise, it forces you to breathe deeply, forces more oxygen into the brain, get rid of that foul air that you have been breathing all day long, and your rest, I should say, your sleep is more restful. So it is best, as Dr. Douglas said, and as Brother Saul said, to get your exercise in the evening if you cannot get it in the morning, because that helps to bring about a more restful sleep at night.
Thank you. And I see some.
Just a
Go
short.
ahead.
I haven't been attached to the psychiatric hospital where I did a little therapy. I had written a paper for the treatment of psychiatric patient. One of the things I recommended was exercise, and something that I really didn't see happening there. So exercise and nutrition to try it as an experiment. You know, some of the patients who tried the exercise program were more alert, were more agile, and were more focused. Those who were exercising. And that itself was interesting. And I've seen some people who I know are psychiatric patients exercising, which is good. And when you have conversation with them, you see that they are focused, they are more committed, they are more alert, they are more, as it were, on point. So exercise does help, even with those.
Thank you all. And I noticed that someone said in the chat, Bishop White Sage to help with sleeping. And Carissa says, I have never heard anyone say this, but blue vervain tea has helped me to sleep more peacefully. Others can try it to see if it really works. All right, so we have more recommendations. Next hand was Sister Jenny, then Brother Broom, then Brother Dexter McKnight, then I'll go to a question on YouTube, and we are actually extended it to 6:30 this afternoon. So please, if you have a question, you have to get it in within that time period. So Sister Jenny and then Brother Broom.
Good evening, everyone. The question is to Brother Elliot Douglas. Can the use of green pawpaw and blackstrap molasses, can the use of those two items reduce high blood pressure?
Okay, thank you. First of all, we had a study out of Jamaica there at the university some time ago that Mauby bark, this is the bark, we're not talking about sugar, Mauby bark mixed with coconut water can help to lower blood pressure. Blackstrap molasses, because of its high content of potassium and calcium, helps to lower blood pressure as well. There are certain herbs around, for example, parsley, cucumber, the high water content vegetables, Christophine and so on. And then there has even been some studies looking at breadfruit leaf and neem. All of these can help within a lifestyle change to lower blood pressure. But what we as doctors usually tell people is this: if your blood pressure is significantly elevated, you should be under medical supervision, lifestyle change, or whatever else you may be looking to try, be discussing it with your medical practitioner, because any significantly high blood pressure may need, at least initially, some medication to bring it down outside of the risk range for stroke and heart attack. I have known people who had very high blood pressure and abandoned their medication and tried things and were not even monitoring the blood pressure and ended up with a massive cerebral bleed. You can't just do things willy-nilly. You would have heard a talk by Dr. Connell, who is our local high blood pressure expert, dean of the faculty there, Kenneth Connell. And he said it is now recommended that everybody, especially high blood pressure patients, but everybody should have a blood pressure monitor to monitor their blood pressure at home under relaxed conditions and make sure it is all right. And then with lifestyle changes, so you keep it all right. And a lot of blood pressure patients will only get their blood pressure managed, monitored when they go back for a 4-month appointment. So all that 4 months away from the doctor, taking whatever they're taking, medication or whatever else they're trying, and not checking it doesn't make sense. You have to be checking and monitoring that blood pressure. There must be lifestyle adjustment. And whatever good herbs they may be used, no problem, but you cannot just forget the numbers and forget supervision. And when you hear the shout, your blood pressure is not being controlled because you don't know where it is, and something happens then, and that is not good. So the monitoring is very important. We know that green leafy vegetables, herbs, the high water content vegetables and so on help to lower blood pressure, reducing salt. Exercise is excellent for blood pressure, a good night's rest. And just talking about the sleep question that was asked by the Vincentian sister, Sister Carissa mentioned blue vervain. Of course, we know that magnesium helps people to sleep better, chamomile herbal tea. The amino acid glycine helps people to rest better. Valerian root, skullcap, and if you're over the age of 40, melatonin, and a dark room at night. Some people must have an absolutely dark room and absolute silence to rest properly. That's important. And melatonin is going to be important. If you pass the age of 40, 50, melatonin is one of the best natural ways to get a good night's sleep. But blue vervain, valerian, chamomile, the amino acid glycine, and the mineral magnesium all help to contribute to sleep. And as Lillicott mentioned, if there's an emotional problem, emotional counseling is crucial in many sleep disorders.
If I can add
Thank you.
to what Brother Douglas said, by drinking a hot glass of magnesium, but just magnesium dissolved into a glass of hot water at night really brings about a restful night rest. To Sister Jenny, when you were speaking about green pawpaw, I remember initially when I went to Dr. Dublin and he checked my blood pressure and he was asking me, what is it doing up in 140 something? That was like 2 years ago. And then as late as last year, before I had my event, that is one thing I started doing, Sister Jenny. I would take a green pawpaw and I would grate it. I would just peel off the green of the outside and grate it and put it next to my food and eat it. Incidentally, I thought it would have tasted bad. It tasted just like cucumber. But old people used to use green pawpaw to tenderize a tough old fowl that they get out of the yard and they're trying to cook it. Why? Because it contains certain enzymes in it that softens up the meat. So it does the same thing in your arteries. All those stiff arteries that we're talking about, by eating green pawpaw, it tends to tenderize your arteries and makes it easier for the blood to flow. So eating green pawpaw, we always go for taste, but I have learned to ignore my tongue, and my tongue does not control me anymore. It's my brain that tells me what to do now. So what I do now is that I will grate the green pepper, put it next to the food, and I just eat it just like that. It becomes like a Saturday. So these are simple things that the old people knew that we have thrown away in favor of medication. Not that medication is wrong, but that these simple things we can do to help ease the doctor's burdens. I had a friend of mine who came to the gym and she was training with me for a period of 4 months. She was on 4 sets of medication for high blood pressure. At the end of the 4 months, she was down to 2. She left the gym and she never returned because the cures of life had its way on her and she back doing a lot of work, and now she's back on all 4 again. So we can see from that simple illustration that exercise can reduce the amount of the blood pressure medication you will have to take. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person was Brother Broom, then brother or sister McKnight, and then a question from YouTube.
Let brother sister McKnight go first, please.
Okay, go ahead, brother or sister McKnight.
Good evening.
Good evening.
There's no sister. Okay. I have 3 questions. 2 for Sister Kamita, or the Sister Kilon. For Sister Kamita and 1 for Brother Douglas. All right. My question is for Sister Kamita. Are there any, based on your talk on monkeypox, are there any other factors that can influence the spread of monkeypox? And the next question is, how long does it last? And what measures are discussed or put in place to control its spread from a public health standpoint? And the other question for Elder Douglas, it's, besides exercise, what herbs can be used for blood circulation?
Okay, thank you, sister. Monkeypox. Really and truly, the incubation period is about 21 days. I would have done a talk on monkeypox a few weeks ago when I realized that we were now having an upsurge. And really and truly, the spread of monkeypox, it is not as transmissible as smallpox and is not as transmissible as, let's say, the coronavirus or influenza. But it doesn't mean that we should dismiss it, because it is also spread by droplet and it is spread by coming in close contact, like touching. Now, the last thing you see in monkeypox is really the pox on your skin, with the sores on your skin. So maybe you will start to avoid people when you see sores on the skin. But before the sores, there is a rash, which can also be infectious. So the measures you put in place are similar to the same measures we're using now for the COVID-19. You keep your distance because the droplets are there. So if the person, let's say, cough on you, or their droplets surf on the surface that you touch, etc., then there's still exposure. But what the scientists are suggesting, and sometimes you have to take a little pinch of salt when you listen to the scientists because they're trying not to scare people. What they're suggesting is that you have to be in intimate contact with the individual to really see the spread. So a lot of the sexual contact, a lot of the sleeping next to the person and hugging the person, they're suggesting that you would more readily catch it like that than catch it if you're walking down the road and you talking to the person close. Chances of your catching it are slimmer. But I still would not rule it out completely, because if you're playing sports and you're coming in close contact with people, you still have to be a little cautious. But it doesn't necessarily mean that a lot of people will get it through that type of spread. But caution is important. And in terms of how long does it last, it goes through different stages. So it might last about 3, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, because really and truly you can incubate it for 21 days. So let's say in terms of travel, So you don't have any symptoms, nothing. You travel from the UK, you come on vacation, you go to Trinidad or you come to Barbados, and about 2 weeks after, then you start to develop some symptoms. All right, so you then start to maybe have a little cough, a little runny nose, or you start to see a rash on your skin 3 weeks after, and then you start to get pox. So that is where the issue comes in, because travel is free all over the place. And really and truly, initially, you don't see any symptoms, and it's only coming later down when you're already on your vacation and you're already moving around, then you start to see some signs and symptoms. So I'm not sure if I answer all the aspects, but in terms of public health control, you can wash hands, you can keep your distance, avoid touching, all the things that we're doing now with this pandemic. If you put those things, you can wear a mask, all those things, if you put in place, you can actually avoid the monkeypox and avoid the spread of the monkeypox. But really and truly, it can last a couple of weeks. Thanks. I hope I answered everything.
Yes, thank you.
Sister Carmen, when you say last a couple of weeks, you mean from the time you get it to the time it disappears?
Yes, because remember, it is different stages of the disease. So even though the incubation is 21 days, then when you actually get it, you see some simple signs at first, and then it goes on probably the second week, then you start to develop a rash, then you start to develop the pox. So if you really look at the whole thing, it can be a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, I think the other part of the question was about herbs that improve circulation. Well, in terms of evidence-backed herbs for circulation, ginkgo biloba, ginger, garlic, cayenne, those for sure. And then two important ones, gotu kola and pine bark extract, which is called pycnogenol. They can improve circulation in the arteries in the leg, improve circulation to the brain, improve circulation overall. Let me go over them again. Ginkgo biloba, ginger, garlic, cayenne, pine bark extract, and gotu kola. They enhance blood flow and help to relax arteries and reduce arterial stiffness. Ginkgo biloba, ginger, garlic, cayenne, pine bark extract, and gotu kola. In terms of veins, grapeseed extract and the orange skin bioflavonoids improve vein circulation as well. Which one you're showing there, Brother Steve?
Unmute your mic, please.
Sorry, this one is grapeseed extract that you can see right here. You can see, everybody can see it. Good. And I will add two more to that. Nattokinase, made from a fermentation of what do you call it now? Soybean, which is done in Japan. Natto is very good for circulation and breaking up blood clots. And also you have here another one, serrapeptase. This is also very good. I use these, I'm not a young man anymore. Blood is circulating as fast. So I buy these things. These are very protective, very small price to pay to avoid having to go under the knife.
Okay, thank you. A question that has been on YouTube for a while is, well, two questions related to each other. What are the causes of high cholesterol, and what is recommended to lower high cholesterol?
Well, high cholesterol simply means that the cholesterol level or concentration in the blood is above a certain limit. When we talk about the total cholesterol level, Ideally, it should be less than 5.2 millimoles per liter. Where we're talking about what people call the bad cholesterol or the LDL or low density lipoprotein cholesterol. If you are otherwise healthy, you want that ideally to be in the 2s or lower 3s. If you have any risk factor, the experts say it should be down towards 1. If your cholesterol total and the bad cholesterol LDL is elevated, it can mean that there are problems, genetic problems in the liver, or genetic problems in clearing the cholesterol from the blood, and then a family history would indicate. But most commonly it is diet: high fat, high cholesterol, high saturated fat, high sugar diets will all contribute to an elevated cholesterol. Doctors use drugs called statins, like atorvastatin, trade name Lipitor, and rosuvastatin, trade name Crestor, as the top 2 for lowering cholesterol. But things like oat bran, alfalfa sprouts, broccoli, and red clover sprouts, cutting out the saturated fat and the high cholesterol foods, exercise, all of those things can help to lower cholesterol. As a matter of fact, the American Heart Association says a 3-month trial should be given on diet, cutting out the high cholesterol meats, using legumes like lentils and so on, using the cruciferous vegetables, using oat bran. The soluble fiber in oat bran can actually pull the dangerous fats out from being absorbed in the gut. Alfalfa sprouts, flaxseed, and is very good for helping to lower cholesterol. Flax, oat bran, alfalfa sprouts, broccoli sprouts, more green leafy vegetables, and cutting out the animal high fat stuff will be a natural approach. Some people use red rice yeast, which contains a natural statin similar to lovastatin. Those can be used as well. If the cholesterol is very high, most doctors will opt early o'clock for a statin, but the American Heart Association recommends a 3-month trial on lifestyle diet and natural things like the oat bran and soluble fibers before rushing to the statin. But if the cholesterol is very high and you're also hypertensive and diabetic, that spells trouble for deposits in the artery, which can cause trouble in the coronary arteries or stroke.
I would also add here that I would encourage everyone to listen to that YouTube video, Sugar, the Bitter Truth. You will get to realize, as Dr. Duggan has been telling us for a long time, if we cut out sugar completely out of our diet, except for that is naturally occurring, we will see a significant reduction in our cholesterol levels. A lot of us love to eat or snack on things, especially biscuits and all these little junk things. You will see women in general tend to do it, men do it too, but women will go to town and they gotta bring back a snack for the children. And you always gotta bring back some little piece of junk and give the children to eat, and you're starting them on a road to disease at a very early age. Bourbon biscuits, this creamy thing in the middle of the biscuits to eat. It ain't too sweet. It's just a treat. It's every now and then, you know, every now and then adds up. 1-on-1, blow a kill work out. So therefore, don't start it in the first place. Avoid these things. Eat a pure diet, full stop. Don't transgress. Do not say that you're just doing it every now and then. Every now and then adds up to often.
Thank you, Brother Steve. I see Pharmacist Carter is mentioning there that if you're using a statin, if your doctor has prescribed a statin, or if you're using even red rice yeast, you should take the supplement coenzyme Q10 along with it to prevent any side effects of the statin and to protect the heart, coenzyme Q10. Thanks for that, Brother Carter.
Okay, so now, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, you can go ahead.
Q10.
All right, it says 32, and I see that there were 3 hands up before the time. So Brother Broom had given away. So we will let him go ahead now. And then we'll have, please, these last 3 persons make your questions extremely short, and the answers will have to be equally short. So Brother Broom, then Sister Jenny, and then Brother Adrian Carter in that order. Thank you.
My question, thank you very much. My question is about, sorry. My question is about continuous burping. Is it a sign of a stomach malady? Or is it something other, you know, you consume a lot of vegetables and so on. So this continuous burping, and what is this thing called leaky gut? What is that all about? So if you can just touch on those quickly for me, I'd appreciate it.
Well, those are big subjects. Just briefly, some people, and especially older people, as you get older, certain foods can lead to bacterial fermentation and production of hydrogen and other gases. And you tend, as you get older, you tend to burp more with certain foods than when you were younger. That's one. It has to do with the kind of food. For example, some people, when they use peas, get more flatulence or gas. Some people, if they use the fructose oligosaccharides, certain fruits tend to get more gas. And they have to pick and choose and cut down. It is not usually it's usually a benign situation. It has to do with the kind of gut bacteria. You will find, for example, that berberine, that wonderful supplement I've been talking about recently, can so adjust the gut bacteria, get less of a gas problem, berberine. And also using papaw leaf in a shake, cut down on the gas that you produce. So it has to do with the gut bacteria and the kind of foods and the certain sugars and starches that the bacteria may metabolize down to certain gases. And some people have more than others, and they may run in families. But as you get older, you tend to produce more gas. I say I went to St. Lucia there, and well, in St. Lucia, I was offered a large number of mangoes, and I ended up giving them all away because I tried one special St. Lucia mango that is ranked #1, and I think it's Sabbath afternoon as part of lunch, and experienced volcanic activity during the night. So I gave all the other mangoes because of the flatulence. So that happens depending on what
funny, Doc.
and bacteria.
Doctor, can I add a little piece here, please? For the Brother Broom can listen in on this. For years, I was diagnosed with leaky gut syndrome as well. My stomach was always in turmoil. No matter what I eat, it would be a lot of burping. There was always passing of air and foul smelling air at that. There are some people who even reminded me about it, wondering where all the air gone that I had a few years ago. And I went and I got a barium enema. Then I had Dr. Cheeseman push a tube up me and clean and all sorts of things. But it boils down to simply that as you get older, your body does not produce enough hydrochloric acid. If it doesn't produce enough hydrochloric acid, the foods that we eat, which are still high in sugar, as Dr. Duggan just said, causes fermentation in the stomach. And if you avoid the sugar as much as possible, don't even drink. As Dr. Duggan does know, you might think that I follow him in every respect. Sometimes I do, but I do not put sugar in drink, full stop. You drink the drink just like that, but we like to have a little sweet taste in our mouth, so we like to transgress a little bit, and we suffer the consequences. No sugar for me, full stop. I have, as a rule now, I went to Idaho and I learned this from a lady down there named Swanee Dickman. She's a herbalist, and I came down there with that problem for years, and she told me to start using hydrochloric acid. I keep about 2 or 3 bottles around because I have one in my car all the time. Every time I am about to eat a meal, I take 1 or 2 with it. if I am going to eat a large meal, which isn't too often, I might take 3 or 4, and I have no discomfort whatsoever because it raises the hydrochloric acid level in the stomach and thus eliminates that problem where I have improper digestion. Improper digestion causes fermentation, and that fermentation gives rise to burping and gas. Thank you.
Okay, it's your turn very quickly, Sister Jenny.
Yes, please. Sister Carmela, can you comment briefly on the new strain of the Omicron COVID-19 virus, BA.5, which is very infectious, and its effect on the public health system?
Okay, it's actually a substrain because Omicron is already a strain in itself. So the BA.5 is a substrain. We're not sure if it is here as yet. We're actually sent samples for sequencing to CARFA because obviously with travel, we can have every strain in the US, in the UK, whatever, with easy travel and with no testing at the borders, they are going to be coming in. The BA.5, it is said that it is even more infectious, that substrain, than some of the other Omicron strains, and is also making you a little sicker. It doesn't mean that it is deadly because Omicron is not really deadly, but you would find that some of the other strains, you were almost asymptomatic, you weren't sick in bed. Now, our entire house had COVID. I was actually the last person. I'm being released tomorrow. And I've never seen my husband sick in bed until he got this particular strain. And he was actually sick in bed straight for like 2 days. And my niece that brought it in from the US, she was sick for almost 3-4 days. All right. And Imani was also sick in bed for like 2-3 days. So, I mean, we're thinking that maybe we had BA.5, but we don't know for sure. But the BA.5 is causing a bit more sickness. You're feeling weak, lifeless. You're having the headaches, you know, and you feel like resting. So that's basically it. So even though it's an Omicron strain, because it is the BA.5 and there's BA.4, BA.5, you're feeling a little more sick just for a short period of time, not much more than 2-3 days. And then you're pretty much back to normal. So that's as much as I can say on it at this particular time, but it is a substrain of the Omicron. So it is not deadly like Delta, but it still makes you a little sick.
Thank you.
And the last question, thank you, Brother Adrian Carter.
Good evening. This question is for Doc. In terms of 1,000 mg of vitamin C, what really is time release?
The time release supplement means that 500 milligrams are released fast. The other 500 milligrams are slowly or time release over 12 hours. So you have a immediate rise in the level and then a sustained level, which is a good supplement. You have sustained levels throughout the day if you take 1 twice a day.
Thank you. Thank you. All right.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you all. We have now come to the end of this year's Health Focus panel discussion, and we are very grateful to the panelists who have shared their knowledge, enlightened us, and helped us to be equipped to more positively and successfully approach life in a sick world. Thank you also to you, the listeners, and all who contributed to the discussion. And just a reminder that this year's Health Focus culminates tomorrow. In the morning, we have a virtual exercise activity at 7 o'clock. So you may join us on Zoom or you may join us on YouTube, the same platforms. And I invite you to...
Just YouTube. It's pre-recorded, so just YouTube.
Okay, only on YouTube. So you can join on YouTube and exercise, get your clothes on, and let's get moving tomorrow morning. And let's keep moving. Let's not do it as a one-off activity, but let's make it a part of our lifestyles to exercise and become physically fit. Someone was asking again for Brother Steve's number. So I'll read it again at this time because more and more persons are becoming interested in getting personal training and getting exercise into their daily activities. So that number is 2534798. And the final activity will be tomorrow at the church, True for the Final Generation Church, Bailey's Hill, Redmonds Village, St. Thomas, from 2:00 p.m. to 5:00, where you can get your free height, weight, and BMI checks, free blood pressure, blood sugar testing, and free health talks. Everything is free tomorrow from 2:00 to 5:00 p.m. True for the Final Generation Church, Bailey's Hill, Redmonds Village, St. Thomas. And if you have missed any of our sessions during the week or during the 2-week period on healthy cooking, mental health, good gardening practices, natural remedies, and skincare, you can find them on YouTube at TFFG Barbados 84. So you can go on because they're recorded and you can have a look at those presentations. Healthy cooking, mental health, natural remedies, skincare, and good gardening practices. So we hope that you're able to join us tomorrow, and we encourage you all to determine to live healthier lives and inspire others to do the same. At this time, I invite Elder Leacock to give us our closing prayer.
All right, let us pray. Oh, gracious God and Father, we thank you for this panel discussion this evening. We thank you for all that has been said. May something that has been said stimulate and motivate us to recognize the importance of not just our physical health, but also psychological, mental, and emotional hygiene as well. Help us to realize that almost everything begins in the mind, even our spirituality and the need for change, even our motivation and change for our health, from an unhealthy lifestyle to a healthy lifestyle, all begins in the mind. And the willpower you are willing to give us. For the will is the governing force in the nature of man. Thank you for all that has been said. Guide and direct us and help us to put into practice what we have heard. Otherwise, it would be in vain listening. So guide and direct every individual who would have heard. Bless all those who will hear as they tune in to listen. Grant success to all our effort and to become more focused on this do-it-yourself project, even our health. Guide and direct us now. Thank you for hearing and answering our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 So have a good evening, everyone.